We are so close to the first live game action from the Cincinnati Bengals of 2024, one of the most anticipated seasons and a little bit of a tumultuous offseason in some ways, is starting to kind of go through its process, and the Bengals are set to take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in an interconference preseason kickoff. And it's going to look a little different than some of the others in recent history. And we'll talk about that in just a second. I'm Anthony Cosenza. This is the Orange and Black Insider. And I am joined by the brains of the operation over here, John Sheeran. John, he's got the stylish shirt on. He's ready to paint the town red this weekend. How you doing, bud?
Doing well. The tumultuous offseason that you brought up. Imagine what it would be if T. Higgins was Brandon Ayuk right now.
Yeah. A lot of stuff. Yeah. A lot of stuff with the Ayuk deal where, man, he, who knows what's going on there. There's just all kinds of twists and turns with that. And, a lot of AFC North attention because of Brandon Ayuk there as well this week. But at any rate, I guess tumultuous is not the best word to use for the Bengals offseason. But, I mean, there's been some twists and turns and hold-ins and I don't know, all kinds of different stuff happening, right?
I'm starting to think that, like, if you don't go through some type of controversy like that, you're probably just going to be irrelevant as a team. And maybe that was the case. Like, for most of the time I've been following the Bengals, like, yeah, there's been some contract disputes here and there, but they really only started to be prevalent once they started winning again. And it's just funny how half the AFC North is in on this receiver who obviously wants to rightly get paid $30+ million, but also wants to go to a place where he, wants to play. And that place ended up being Pittsburgh. And then I guess he did maybe a little bit more research about what an Arthur Smith offense looks like. And now he's, Kyle Shanahan offense. I can probably work with that in alternative wise.
Yeah. So, lots of twists and turns with that one. But, hey, the Bengals are going to be taking the field. It was a chippy week at practice this week, a little bit of scuffles going on, and some guys in and out of the lineup. This is that time of year where injuries happen, and the Bengals got some pretty bad news about one of their players getting some. They're holding their breath on another, and then they've got some others that are maybe returning. We'll talk about that. Injuries who we may or may not see this week going forward against the Buccaneers. It would seem that as the preseason goes on, some of these guys will be coming back, but we'll talk about that. And this is, as I mentioned, the Orange and Black Insider, part of the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. We are now on the Believe Network with we are pleased to be on the Believe Network. There is a lot of talent across that network, and we're just happy to be a part of that family. And our channel is, of course, comprised of our show, the Orange and Black Insider, as well as Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends, 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin. And can't forget the guys, Matt and Willie, because they know ball, and that's the name of their show. And that is all on the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. You have to if you were a subscriber to when we were with SB Nation, you need to resubscribe to the Believe channel. That's where we are, and that's where you can get all the shows, and that's where all this stuff will be automatically uploaded. You'll get notified of all of that. So go do that. Go do the thing. Give us a rating on iTunes and stuff too, if you can. That would be very, very helpful. And of course, if you like the video side of things, Facebook, the Cincy Jungle Facebook page with about 90,000 people liking that one. So go there. On one of many Twitter accounts, we are streaming live. And of course, on our YouTube channel, We've got healthy amount of subscribers. We're pretty pleased with that. So go and, if you would, click the show icon underneath John by that Cincy Jungle icon there, and do the whole subscribe, bell, thumbs up, do all the things. We're asking a lot of you, but we appreciate the help. We appreciate the help in the listening of our shows here. So let's talk some preseason week one. The Bengals are set to clash with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and a team they don't see very often, but this is usually around the time when they do. So I don't know, John. I mean, obviously the big goals, or the main thing, of course, is to stay healthy. We're going to talk about goals right now, but this is always hard for this question here. With week one of the preseason, it could get sloppy. You're seeing a lot of guys who will get extended playing time who may not be on this roster in a few weeks. They're kind of auditioning not only for the Bengals, but potentially for other teams out there. So what should be the expectations be in a game like this? A team that, you don't see very often, not on your regular season schedule, that sort of thing. I mean, what are the expectations here?
I think it's almost like demeaning to say, but like the whole reason why you're going to have the starters out there, including the quarterback, is to just go through the motions of getting out onto the field, taking the play calls from the field, from the sideline, executing them, and then putting together a drive. Like, it sounds so like rudimentary, like this is like peewee stuff, but the whole reason why they're doing it is because they're going to run into some issues, right? We've seen that in the first 2 weeks of the past 2 seasons where they're just coming out the gate flat, right? And it's live ball, right? It's regular season, the games matter, and that's the last place that you want for that. So the goal obviously isn't to win the game. It's not to score 30, 40 points and put up like an offensive explosion. The playbook is obviously going to be very limited, not just for the sake of keeping guys safe, but you don't want to show too much to the opposition. You don't want to show too much to future opponents on tape. So the play calls are going to be limited in that sake, but also like the goal is just to execute and just get through a drive or two with the starters out there and have everything go smooth, because odds are there's going to be some hiccups, and this is the exact arena where you want those hiccups to happen. So my expectation is they are going to have some growing pains. There is going to be some minor miscommunication, right? And this is the exact time for all of that to happen. So a perfect, I guess, result would just to be everyone stays healthy. Obviously, no nicks or bruises, no major injuries. The communication's on point. You're getting in and out of the huddle. You're not taking delay of games. You're not having false starts. Probably something along those lines is going to happen, and that's perfectly fine. It's going to be, you're going to roll your eyes a little bit, and you're going to be annoyed. They've had a couple of weeks of practice to kind of go through this all, but it's just a different setting when you're in live action and there's another team across from you and there's thousands of fans in the stadium, even if it is at home. So this is the time to go through all of that process and just to see how ready they are right now.
Yeah, my expectations, quite frankly, are low. I mean, it's week one of the preseason. It's they haven't had the other team in camp and going up against another team in camp type of thing. The inter-teams scrimmages and all that kind of stuff that you see here and there. So it might be a little sloppy, whether it is from the starters or from the players who haven't been getting many snaps and will be getting a high amount of snaps this week. But I do expect some level of productivity from the starting offense. And I am expecting and I guess hopeful that when their time is done in this game, that we step back and we say, hey, I'm not that concerned. The things look pretty good. And to your point, John, I mean, I know the Bengals' first month of the season sets up, based on last year's records of the teams that they face, sets up pretty favorably for them. But as you said, it's 1 to 2, if not more, weeks in the past couple of years that they've started really slow out of the gate. And guess who game number 2 is this year on the Bengals season? That's the Kansas City Chiefs. So you can't sit here and you can't do this rinse and repeat of 2-3 weeks. Your first month is basically kind of thrown away a little bit as has been the case in the regular season for the past 2 years. So all of that said, I've kind of felt, and I think we've all kind of felt, the collective has, that part of that slow start issue is because your starting offense hasn't been out there. Burrow's had some injury stuff he's coming back from, all of that kind of stuff. So the expectation for me is, at least, I don't know if crisp is necessarily the expectation, but something where you could say, man, you come away from this game and you say, you know what, there were some nice moments from this starting offense, regardless of the unit that they may be going up against in Tampa Bay. There are some nice moments in this offense. Maybe the new faces make a play or two that you go, wow, nice work. And then you get them out of there, hopefully all healthy.
Yeah, and obviously it all starts with the quarterback. How much does he play? Zach Taylor predictably didn't give away much of the cheese there. It could be a drive. It could be a quarter. We have no idea. I would probably lean towards less action compared to more. But again, that's just speculation on my part. Who knows? They may want to give him at least 2 series. Maybe the first series goes really quickly and they want to get him out for another one. Perfectly healthy enough to do that at this point. There's no, I think, caution about anything with his wrist, anything more than what they have been in recent weeks. So obviously want to get that out of the way. But also I am curious, Anthony, like the players, there are some new players, but there is also a new-ish dynamic with the coaching staff too that I feel like we haven't really talked about. And obviously with Dan Pitcher now, the offense coordinator, he's going to be up in the booth, which is where Brian Callahan was for his years as the offense coordinator. Obviously, Zach Taylor still has the final say in calling the plays, but meaning Dan Pitcher, now has Justin Riscati alongside him in the booth as the pass game coordinator. And this is interesting to me because it's not a common position necessarily. It's not like not every team has one, but Joe Burrow did have one years ago at LSU. It was Joe Brady. And I think a lot of people should credit a lot of the growth that LSU took to Joe Brady coming down there and revolutionizing that passing game. If I ever interviewed Joe Burrow, I want to ask him about the dynamic between a passing coordinator and offense coordinator and the quarterback, how that triumvirate, I guess, works in terms of scheming and diagramming play calls and going through the game like that. So that's a new dynamic that I'm interested to see the communication wise, because obviously we're not going to like see that. Like we may see, a camera shot or two of Pitcher and Riscati up in the booth. But again, just that communication of that, there's another voice kind of in that pre-snap process and how things kind of flow in and out. And I think we might be able to glean into how that's all going based off of how quickly they're getting to the line. They don't have any crowd noise to worry about. It's at home and it's a preseason game, so that shouldn't be an issue. But I'm interested to see how quickly things kind of operate in that first drive with Burrow out there.
That's an interesting dynamic that and I do think. Well, I don't know if I think this. I think I guess I think it's a possibility that the implementation of a passing game coordinator finally for the Bengals is a little. I don't want to say a crutch, but it's a helpful asset for a guy ascending to offensive coordinator position for the first time in his career. You kind of hope that it's going the way that it kind of has gone, where, when you do that in-house hire and this person has been here for a couple of years, they kind of get the flow of things and whatnot, and having an extra set of eyes and, that'll help you with the approach in the passing game. That helps you. People may or may not remember, but this was kind of the coaching blueprint of the LA Rams under McVay, when the Bengals were hiring Zach Taylor and interviewing Shane Waldron, who was the passing game coordinator, if memory serves, with the Rams at that point. And so this setup, this coaching setup, this passing game coordinator idea, this was from the McVay system tree, what have you, that Taylor came from, that Waldron came from. Waldron, if you remember, was interviewed for the same head coaching job. So I think this is by design in a couple of different ways, the passing game coordinator. And you're right, we haven't talked about it that much. So that is an interesting dynamic that we're going to have to see at work. And I think and hope that part of the plan with that hire is to, again, broaden what the Bengals are doing on offense, diversify their looks, and do different things.
Yeah, and that's the whole point, right? And how much we're going to see from that in preseason, probably very little. I think in general, like how much they protect Joe is interesting. I think there was someone who did a study on like average time to throw for veteran quarterbacks in the preseason, it's like 2.2 seconds, like on average. Very rarely are these long developing plays. It's mostly out of shotgun, maybe some play action to get the ball out quickly. If you remember, like like the 3 snaps that Burrow took in preseason 2021, it was run, and then like a screen to Jamar Chase.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
Chase dropped,
yeah,
and he was
yeah.
suffering the dropsies back then. I would imagine it's going to be some quick slants, maybe a dump off or two,
Yeah.
maybe once where he's reading down the field, maybe a deep shot here and there, but it's not, there's not going to be a lot of pressure, I would think, on the offensive line, partly because I think Todd Bowles did mention, the coach of the Buccaneers, that their starters aren't going to play long, if at all. So it's going to be a lot of second stringers for the defensive line. And by all accounts, the Bengals offensive line looks pretty decent right now. Obviously, they haven't gone up against a lot of starters for the Bengals defensive line, but you've got Marius Mims out there at right tackle. He's a player to watch that we'll get to in a minute. But I think the offensive line has been building some continuity, and I think that they've been protecting Burrow for the most part in practice. So I think he should have enough time to get out, again, like 2.5 second type throws to not going to really test the defense that much.
You mentioned how much time the offense will be out there. How long? My guess is probably no more than 2 series. And I think 2 series will be the case if the first series is a 3 and out or something like that, or it's all runs or something like that. Then they may trot him out there again to see if they can kind of do some different things. But I am pretty sure that's that. I mean, that's just where my estimation is at this point. And I do think whether or not they are playing and we'll transition kind of into goals here for the team. Obviously, health is one of them, but I do think and hope that we come away with this kind of with the feeling of how big college football programs line up their first week or 2 weeks and who they play, So if it's the Bengals starters against the 2/3s of the Tampa Bay defense, you see them kind of carving them up. You take a step back and you go, well, okay. I mean, that makes some sense, but you want that confidence builder moment or moments in this game for the offense, and not that they lack it. It's just the lack of continuity, the Burrow injuries that have occurred over the past handful of years and everything with that. You just want something to go in there again where on offense, where you say things looked pretty clean. They moved the ball a little bit, maybe got some points. Let's get them out of there, stay healthy, and keep building from there. That to me is the goal. When, it sucks and is weird to say wins and losses don't matter, but I mean, that's kind of the case here. For me, that's kind of the biggest goal, aside from everybody, no major injuries, people being healthy.
Yeah, I think Burrow told Kate Adams that his ideal preseason game is just being out there for a drive and scoring a touchdown. So I think no matter what setting you are, like, that's just a success. Typically something's going to go right there in terms of the whole process and everything. I would say, like converting multiple first downs if you're the first team offense, maybe seeing what you can do on 3rd and medium, 3rd and long, trying to like maybe fire like a tight window throw, kind of test the arm at this point. I think he's been kind of doing that on and off. Burrow has been in practice. I think the latest practice you saw some tight window red zone throws, and he's been just trying to put more zip on it. And I think that's just been a process of him testing to see where his wrist is at the moment. And, I think he's also put an emphasis on these all off platform throws he's throwing across his body. He's really just he's gauging where he is right now, and maybe just once, maybe test it against some type of tight coverage. Obviously, again, stick to the playbook and everything, and don't put your guys in harm's way. But yeah, you want to see some type of offensive success in terms of converting first downs and success rate and all that good stuff. And obviously, on the defensive side of the ball, like, that's hasn't really been that much of a talking point, just because typically defensive starters do play for the Bengals. Like, they played almost a whole quarter, I think, against the Falcons in the preseason opener last year, or at least it seemed that way. They were on the field for like 8 minutes for a single drive, and they were completely gassed, and they came away with a turnover, I think, right at the goal line. So we've seen in recent years a lot of plays made by the Bengals defense. And if you're talking about a Bucs offense that's not going to be out there with a lot of its stars, I think you have chances to make those type of game-breaking plays. We've seen a lot of highlights, I think, from camp regarding interceptions. DJ Turner finally caught one for the first time in his practice career the other day. If you had a rookie 6th-round, 7th-round pick, Dijon Anthony, having like 3 interceptions or something like that, this is typically the stage where you have those type of game-breaking moments. And I think the defense can do that again, it would be a success in my opinion.
I would like as a goal, at least from the viewing side, but Bengals faithful should also have a goal of coming away in some of these spots that not only are there questions about depth, guys who have departed from those position groups in free agency and the new people that they've brought in, the groups that have been hit by injury so far at this point in training camp. I would like to come away feeling like, you know what? This feels deeper than maybe we thought it might. There's hope that some of these position groups are deeper and I don't want to say more talented. I think there are high hopes for the players that the Bengals brought in, obviously, but I would like a feeling of a semblance of, you know what, the worries about depth and about immediate contributions from some of these players, that sort of thing. I would really like it if we came away from this game saying, hey, nice moments from guys that are lower down on the pecking order in terms of depth chart, that sort of thing, at these spots that we have questions.
Yeah, you want to see guys look like they belong. And I think a great athleticism disparity can sometimes be found in preseason games. Like if you just have two teams who have these weird matchups between their second or third strings or whatnot, it does seem like on paper the Bengals are more athletic pretty much everywhere on the roster, even though there's like maybe one or two position groups that haven't really seen that much change. Like I guess linebacker is one of them where it's mainly the same faces. You're going to have Joe Bacci and Akeem Davis-Gaither play a ton of snaps for most of the game. And then like guys like Shaka Hayward and Devin Harper are going to see some time as well. But yeah, like the secondary, it's still a lot of the same young pieces from last year who can move and scoot, and they have more experience now. And hopefully a lot of that athleticism is put to good use. The defensive line, though, is going to be, and that's going to be a talking point regarding the injuries, but it's been undergone a lot of change recently, and you don't want to see guys getting blown off the ball, even against like backup offensive linemen, right? Like that would be not the greatest sign of like, okay, they're going up against their peers, similar talents on the opposite side of the trench. And if you're seeing guys getting pushed back on the line, linebackers getting in trouble, like that would be a big concern, even if some of these guys are pretty new, but you just want to see, competency there. You're not trying to see a Geno Atkins out there necessarily. You're not expecting that, but if you're seeing guys getting just moved easily, that's probably a problem.
That's probably a problem. How are they going to mix and match Reader's vacancy? A lot of different elements, and we'll talk about specific players to watch. And I know we have a super chat we're going to get to related to that, so we'll bring that up in just a few minutes, closer towards the end of the show as we talk about some players to specifically watch this week, or that we'll be keeping an eye on. I want to remind folks too, by the way, we will be doing a, I don't know if I'm volunteering John or not for this. So you are welcome to come to it, sir, of course, but we will be doing a post-game show tomorrow evening after the game to kind of talk about everything too. So please join us for that. That'll be a lot of fun. And hopefully we're talking about, a win and a productive night and a healthy night. Hopefully we're talking about all of that coming up here, but again, seeing some semblance of crisp play, seeing some semblance of depth, and seeing some nice moments from your starting offense. I think those are all kind of the goals, along with, of course, staying healthy. That's always the name of the game in preseason. And I want to say this too. I don't know what the Bengals will or won't do specifically at final cuts, but they have made some moves in recent history at final cuts, and they have done so, some of which have been, with players that they have gone up against during the preseason. So, this might be a little bit, if you really want to do a deep dive on some of these games, maybe keep an eye on some players from the other team as well, that may stand out at certain positions where you feel like maybe the Bengals would make a potential addition after final cuts or late into the preseason. Just, I don't know, something to kind of think about a little bit. Unfortunately, John, there's been a lot of injuries, and some minor, a lot in a position group or position groups specifically, and that being on the defensive line. Now, unfortunately, here's kind of what we know. Cam Sample Achilles tear, done for the year. Valuable rotational player. Had some effective plays against the run. Had a few quarterback sacks here and there throughout his career. That's gonna hurt. And then you have McKinley Jackson, right? Knee sprain, and he's what, week to week at this point. Said Zach Taylor early this or like the middle of this week he had said that. And so you've got Sam Hubbard, Dominique Davis, Jay Tufele. These are all guys along that defensive line that have really not been available or been in and out of the lineup, and that's really gonna change a lot of things, and we'll see a lot of new faces, it would seem, this Saturday on the defensive line.
Yeah, 100% we're not seeing McKinley Jackson, Dominique Davis. Those guys may not be back until next week at the earliest.
I don't think Tufele either. I think he's coming back next week, it said.
Yeah, Tufele was interesting because he was practicing Thursday, but it might have that might have been his first practice back. So you're right. I think it probably would be too early to see him come back, and that's reflected by they've signed Carlos Davis, who's been around for a couple of teams. I think he was originally drafted by the Steelers back in 2020. Yep. Joshua Pryor was another defensive tackle that they've added. So at this point, they have probably, including Sheldon Rankins and BJ Hill, you're looking at 7 defensive tackles that they can go through, which seems like a lot, but that was like around the number that they originally started with. So that includes 2 new guys, and includes Travis Bell, who's back here after, I think, being added early last year. They still have Chris Jenkins, the rookie who's healthy, a second-round pick, and then Zach Carter, BJ Hill, Sheldon Rankins. I'm not sure how much we're going to see from Rankins and Hill. I know Rankins has kind of been in and out of practices as well. I think he's been on the rehab field for something that's not serious. BJ Hill's had a couple of good practices. Zach Carter's obviously in the mix as well. It's kind of a make it or break it year for him. So I would imagine we see plenty of Chris Jenkins. They want to give him some snaps as a rookie. Zach Carter is going to get a lot of run too, just to see if he is worthy of making this team. But yeah, man, this would have been a great chance to see McKinley Jackson for the first time. And I think he was having a pretty good camp. So thankfully, the injury is not season ending or anything, and obviously being a 3rd-round pick means he's probably going to make the team regardless. But this is a great chance for him to really solidify himself and prove that he does deserve some type of significant role as one of the only true nose tackles here. But he's probably not going to be out there. He might not be out there until maybe the last week of the preseason.
You and I, gosh, was it last show prior? We were lauding the depth of the Bengals wide receiver group, and lo and behold, that took a little bit of a hit this week. Still trying to find out some more information on an MRI that was done on Charlie Jones's knee. Yoshi kind of said, hey, it seemed like he bonked knees with someone out there, was carted off. Yoshi seemed to think that he will be fine, but we are waiting for some sort of definitive report on that. I would think that Jones, even if he is fine, is not. We probably won't see him this Saturday out of precautionary reasons on that. But hope for the best there. Important camp for him. Important year for him in a lot of ways. Should he be, and hopefully he is, healthy the rest of the way here, because he's kind of been relegated a little bit to punt returner, and he's kind of getting lost in the hype machine that is Yoshi and others having good camp, Burton and others having good camps. So kind of big year for him. Burrow did say he's been looking pretty good up until this point. So unfortunate that this injury occurred, but let's just hope it's not serious.
Yeah, it was really scary when we first kind of heard about it, because he was down on the ground for a while and everyone seemed pretty concerned, and he got carted off because he couldn't put a lot of pressure. I believe it was his right knee, which is what they were looking at. And then reports came out right at the end of practice that he was walking around on his own power with kind of a notable limp, but he seemed to be in good spirits. I don't know if that's in the sense of how he was feeling, but he did get an MRI, and he's just basically said, we'll see. And then I think the team kind of prevented him from talking about it even more, which could just be we just don't know. So anything that we are kind of hear at this point is more or less hearsay. It could be anything. It could be a weeks long injury. It could be something that keeps him out for just the next week or so. But you're right, man. He's definitely probably locked in at wide receiver 6. I think Burton, Irwin, and and Yoshi are all kind of ahead of him, along with the two big guys at the top. So if you're talking about a team that maybe keeps 6, he's like the last guy, but there's a chance that they could go to 7, right? And now this is an opportunity specifically, I think, for 2 guys. Kendrick Pryor has gotten surprisingly a decent number of snaps with the ones, and he's making a lot of great contested catches with Joe Burrow throwing him the ball. Shedrick Jackson, guy who even played last year, and he's had a really good camp too. So both guys are really athletic. Shedrick, I mean, the bloodlines of Bo Jackson kind of speak for themselves. He's a 4-2 player in his own right. So Charlie Jones showed a lot of what he was at Purdue, I think, this camp, and that was phenomenal for him because he suffered multiple injuries last year that really hindered his development and playing time. Like, he had like a 80-yard punt return in week 2, and then he broke his thumb in week 3. So like the timing can't be worse for this guy in terms of injuries, but hopefully he did avoid the worst case, because I don't think if he's out for like a week or 2, he's going to miss the team. But like, this is just prime opportunity for both Pryor and Jackson specifically to really make an argument that they should be above him.
Jones had the first touchdown of the Bengals season last year, didn't he? Wasn't he the first that punt return, the first touchdown? Yeah. So that, I mean, good God, talk about slow starts. That's just reopening old wounds there a little bit. But yeah, I mean, that that's the excitement he can bring. And so hopefully he heals up pretty quickly here. And the Bengals, again, we talked about some goals about depth and, showcasing some of that depth and new faces. We talked about the myriad of issues going on the defensive line. So that is a big focal point, I think, this week in terms of where to watch and see who may shine there, or if it's going to be an issue for depth, etc. So let's talk about some players, position battles, etc. to watch. And I want to tee this up because we've been talking the whole time. I want to tee this up with a comment from Mr. Whisper, of course. We gotta get like a special like plaque somewhere on our wallpaper or something for this guy. Gentleman in Skeleton. Hey, it's Randall. It's Randall, right? I am particularly intrigued by the cornerback 2 battle. How extensive do you think the rep range will be for Dax Hill and DJ Turner? That is a very interesting question, because I think there's a fine line to walk here. You want to see what you can from these guys, and you hope that you see good things from both of them in this game. You're relying on them to be kind of in the upper parts of your depth chart, obviously. And you're talking about a first-round pick from a couple of years ago and a second-round pick from last year. How do you walk that line well of making sure they get enough snaps to show you what you want to see, but also not risk injury problems in a meaningless game in a position group that, needs all the depth it can get?
I think just because this is like a straight up competition to be one of the most important starters on the entire team, really, starting cornerbacks.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a position that needs to be solidified. I think that's going to outweigh the risk of injury. Like, they probably wouldn't play them much longer compared to the other starters, but I think specifically for Dax, he just needs the reps there. This is his first offseason developing at this position. And if I were to guess right now, he's probably right behind Turner in that battle. It's still, I would say, pretty close, if not 50-50. But I think Turner has been building some momentum over the past week or so. And I'm not just talking about the interception on an overthrown Joe Burrow vertical route or vertical pass. I think Dax just needs the reps, and that's what's going to, regardless of how well Turner is playing, if he does end up having like a good game on Saturday, I think Dax is going to see the field just as much just to see what he can do. And I think if Turner does end up looking pretty well, like, that's a good challenge for Dax to kind of match him in that. I would like to see them kind of handle similar assignments and similar coverages, just to see like a straight up one-to-one comparison. I have no idea how this is going to turn out, though. I don't think the Bengals know at this point either. I think they're really open to whatever guy winning. But obviously, when you're dealing with a first-round pick entering his 3rd year, not sure if he's going to be a starter at a new position, you want as much of a sample size as you can get. So I don't think they're going to be afraid to play these guys a little bit more compared to some other starters.
And they may need it. I mean, they may need it. Dax is in a positional transition again. And, I mean, you got to see more out of DJ Turner. He gave you a good 1/3, close to a half of a season. And then there were issues in the other rest of the games there. So, I mean, they need some reps, and they need some confidence building reps, I think, as well, not only for themselves, but the coaches to gain confidence in them too. So there's a lot of talent there. There's a lot of speed there. Obviously, it's making that work. And it's also keeping them healthy for the regular season, because you need both those guys around, but you do need them to feel comfortable in the roles there. So good question. I think, to your point though, John, I think we will see probably them a little later into the game than we maybe think just on the surface, right? I mean, we may see a little bit more of them, but I also think they will probably limit some things, and maybe more snaps to come in preseason game 2 right now. But some other players you mentioned, for me, there's a lot. We talked about the interior defensive line, or the defensive line in general, who's going to kind of step up in these in the wake of these injuries, that sort of thing. But you mentioned a specific name earlier who we haven't talked much about at all. He did have a couple of plays recently in camp that, were pretty nice. And so this position group in the back of it is one of the safety spots, and that is Tyson Anderson and Dijon Anthony. Seeing those two duke it out, and Dijon Anthony in particular was the one you brought up. That is a guy that I'm very curious to see how they're going to use him. I'm curious to see how he stacks up in the NFL. I think there's a really intriguing skill set there that could be useful in certain packages for the Bengals. And I say certain packages as a rookie. Who knows? I mean, he could develop into a really, a high snap player down the road type of thing. But I'm very, very interested in seeing that dynamic, and really the safeties in general. There's a lot of new faces there, right? So the safeties in general, but you mentioned his name, and it's not a guy that has been leaping to mind so much recently. So Dijon Anthony is an intriguing player who will probably, I don't know. Just a name. You said his name, and I started kind of saying, yeah, that's a name to watch.
Yeah, I mean, he's been making plays, and I think that's why he's on the minds of some people. And you mentioned Anderson. I would say that the Bengals know who Tyson Anderson is, the special teamer, and him coming off of, I believe it was a torn ACL. It was a bad injury.
You're right.
He slept in the middle last year, right? He's been practicing, but I think in this case where Anthony has so much to prove, right? Like, he's got a chip on his shoulder. I think that works in his favor, and he's got a case to make the Bengals keep potentially 5 safeties. And I think he will get a lot more run, if not like almost all of it, compared to Anderson, because they may want to save Anderson coming off of that injury. They know who he is as a special teamer. Yeah. This is like the platform for Anthony to be like, okay, go make plays, go prove why you deserve to be safety 5 or defensive back 10 or however they want to list it, right? Because that's the other thing with Anthony. He's listed as a safety. He's been doing individual drills with safety, with the other safeties. Was primarily a slot cornerback in college. He was primarily a cornerback in general, right? So the multifaceted skill set there. They have so many slot guys, so many guys who can line up in the nickel. So like, that doesn't really help him out in terms of making the case. If you can be a game breaker behind 2 really solid starting safeties and obviously have 4 years left of a contract, that's really valuable. So how can you translate that training camp momentum into going up against another team and being the same confident, fast playing player who is in the right position to make plays that will force the team to keep you? Because entering training camp, I would have pegged him as the guy with the second least likely chance of making the team, maybe even the least likely chance of making the team, just because of the nature of how deep that room is now. And it didn't used to be like that last year, but that's where it is now. And he was kind of a surprise to be drafted there anyways. So this is it's like he's got nothing to lose essentially. And I think they're going to give him plenty of opportunities to prove himself.
I know there's a certain big man you're wondering about on the other side of the ball and how many snaps he will be receiving. You mentioned his name earlier, and he is Amarius Mims.
It's like, I mean, he looks good, right? Like, this is
he does.
He looks the same as what he did at Georgia. It's just a matter of people didn't see him that often, and they, I guess, devalued the tape because of that. But it helps when you're 6'8", 350 and move like a cheetah, right? You have the speed to get out of your stance and the power to withstand guys who are trying to translate speed to power. So, like, training camp has been, I think, a place for him to shine because, both Hubbard and Hendrickson haven't been practicing that much. So you're going up against guys whose bags aren't as deep. And that may be the case with the Buccaneers backup edge rushers that he faces. The starting defensive line for Tampa Bay is pretty solid. So maybe we do see them for maybe a series just to and give Mims some type of a test. But Zach Taylor did make it a point to say that he will probably play more compared to the other starters on offense, and that's needed. He needs as many reps as possible because of the lack of reps that we've so talked about on this show. So it's been great, right? Just it's not great that Trent Brown was suffering an injury and tightness, but it's good that he's back practicing. It's good that he's just been through this before and he doesn't need weeks of practice leading up to the regular season to get ready. I think he understands his body better than anyone, and he'll be fine if he is asked to start week 1. But yeah, dude, like he's been great in practice. Go translate onto the field. Don't make the silly mistakes that you haven't made so far, and things should be fine for him.
I may very well end up eating my words on this one here, but the dude makes it look easy. I mean, and he's young, and he's he hasn't played a game of NFL football yet, but to come in there and look pretty good immediately, and being, like you said, as big and as quick and as strong as he is, he makes it look pretty easy. So, I think hopefully the Bengals have a good one there, but it will be interesting to see how many snaps he does take, because like you said, they want him to get that experience. They want him to get those snaps under his belt and learn the game a bit more. One other guy that, there's plenty others. We could probably talk about a few more here, but one other guy that I think is now stepping up to prominence, and he was just in the Bengals recent what's that, the mystery box thing where they're grabbing they're grabbing a bowl of SpaghettiOs or something. Did you see that video where they were doing that?
Did not.
No, it's like the deal where the box is in front of them and they hide something.
Yeah.
They show the camera what it is, but they reach in through the sides.
Personally.
Yeah. It was, the one I saw was just a bowl of SpaghettiOs, but they were, as you touch it, they're like, Anyway, just Joseph Ossai was on that video. And so now, as we sit here, the first couple of years of his career, there was excitement, injuries. I'm not going to mention, what happened a couple of years ago towards the end of the season, really, but I will say this. I think, again, we're looking at a huge turning point and pivotal point in his career with the Bengals, that sort of thing. And now no sample. I don't know, man. It's just a guy that's out there that I am really pulling for him. Really am. I think he's got a awesome personality from what I've seen, and he's got skill sets that you like. Now injuries and all kinds of stuff to other players are occurring around him. So I don't know. That's just a guy, whether it's, throughout the entire preseason, that's a guy I'm going to have my eye on, I think.
Well, I hope no one who has access to him asks this question or has asked him this question. But of course, his first ever preseason game was against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he was really good. And then he suffered the season-ending injury, which derailed the beginning of his career. And now he gets to face them again. I mean, he faced them, I think, a year later in 2022. That
right
crazy game late in the season, and I think he played pretty well in that one too. But we can just say this: he's been a menace for Orlando Brown Jr. to block. I think that's personally a bad matchup when Ossai has his head on straight and he's timing the snap correctly and he's getting off some pass rushing moves. I think he's the type of athlete that can get under Orlando Brown Jr.'s pads and create some chaos. And that's, I think, what we've kind of seen in bits and pieces in practice. Obviously, you're not sacking Joe Burrow in these scenarios, but I think there's been some plays where it would have been sacks or maybe even a safety or two. So he's had a solid camp, primarily because not only is he fully healthy and he's gotten now 3 years of development under his belt, but he's got a good matchup. And that's the whole reason why I think they've wanted to see him play in the preseason. I think it's why he played like a lot of preseason last year, and that's what ended up getting him hurt again, because they still need to see stuff from him. They need to see it translate into the games, because he's been really quality in practice with a quality matchup and whatnot. But how does it translate against opponents? They need him now more than ever with Cam Sample out. I think he was, but maybe slightly on the roster bubble before Sample was hurt. Now he's like, they need him as one of the top 4 edges. And if Miles Murphy can develop too, that'd be a great situation for him. But yeah, just I don't think they're scared about like playing him. I think he's in a complete prove it year, and he's got to go out and do it.
I don't want to call it necessarily a redemption story, but just kind of a comeback story a little bit, right? I mean, I would love to see it work out well for him. He just, you saw the emotion at one point in his career when there was, something didn't go well there, and he's been through a lot of injuries and that sort of thing. The talent's there. It's just availability and putting it all together. So that's a player for sure. Who else you got your eye on as we start to close up and get on out of here, John?
I still I feel almost obligated to continue talking about Ryan Rico. Rico is, I guess, how you pronounce his last name. I did some research on him.
Uncle Rico.
He's punting the balls over the mountain,
punt that ball over them mountains. That's right.
I just feel like I need to talk about him, because I feel like I just straight up dismissed him when they signed him, because who cares about a third punter on the team? And then you do more research on the guy, and he was an even more productive punter in the same conference as Austin McNamara was. Like, they both were in the Big 12 last year. His production in terms of average and hang time was on par, if not a little bit better. He was a really good punter out of BYU. He's 25 because he went on like a 3-year mission trip in London. Right. That's what they do over there in Utah. But really developed for being like a rookie. He's on the older side. And the Chiefs signed him. They cut him when punt god Matt Ariza was cleared, publicly, and he ended up winning that job in OTAs and minicamp. And it could be a case where like the Bengals just saw him as like the best possible guy that they could have added as the 90th guy. And then in 2 weeks' time, he beats out McNamara, who had been with the team for like 3-4 months, developing and working with the system. And the guy that the Bengals still wanted, like they targeted after the draft. He and Darren Simmons had like a rapport before the draft. They had communication. So it wasn't like they settled necessarily for Austin McNamara, but then Rico came in and just looked like the better guy. And now he's the guy to compete with Brad Robbins. And this is the 3rd consecutive preseason where they've had a true 1v1 punting battle, and the incumbent has lost both times, whether or not at the beginning of the regular season or at least during the regular season. The new guy typically takes that spot. And Rico, I damned if I say it, like he's got the momentum to potentially do that. So yeah, it's going to be another time where we have our stopwatches, clocking hang time. Like, where on the field are they directing these punts, and are we going to see that giant leg, translate into the field? We'll see.
Yeah, McNamara was let go, I think, around the same time frame that they're bringing in some of the other defensive linemen, et cetera. So yeah, you do wonder a little bit, how much did the injuries at other spots play a part in maybe, saying goodbye to him as well. But you're right. I mean, Rico is kind of, shown enough to be like, hey, I'm going to be the guy to compete here. 3 punters was a little excessive. Won't lie to you about that, but whatever. So yeah, I'm curious. That is a player, of course, that I'm curious about, and may the best guy win. That they got to settle that spot. It's been unsettled really for the past couple of years, and when they think they settled it, it's become unsettled, like as you said, late in seasons, that sort of thing. So they need to get that settled. I mean, there's all kinds of players we could individually point out, the backup running backs, and what the heck are we going to see out of Chris Evans going forward, and all kinds of stuff. So I mean, there's all kinds of players we could point out. You could point at every player right now, every position group, tight ends. That's going to be an intriguing one too. But that small handful, I think, for a variety of reasons, are ones that we're going to have our eyes on. You're welcome to tell us in the comments who you have your eyes on, who you will be watching, and hopefully it's just an enjoying, you have yourself a good time watching the Bengals in their first live game action against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So we will talk about that more with you after the game on Saturday night, and we hope you can join us for that. Let's drop the mic and get on out of here, John, because we are coming up on it. What do you have for us tonight?
It's kind of like a combination of a mic drop with like a remember him, but it's not like a great remember him because everyone's gonna remember this guy. It's the ruler of the jungle for this week, Ray Maluga. Shout out to Ray Maluga. I didn't know if he would ever be a ruler of the jungle in like a big game, but they gave him the first preseason game, which is better than nothing. But I always look back on him as like him and Vontez for different reasons a little bit are just two guys that I just felt like would have been looked at better if they played earlier in the NFL's history. I think Ray Maluga in the time where like Ray Lewis and Zach Thomas were coming up, like he just would have been revered as a better player. I think there were issues with how he was used in Cincinnati, and when offenses started evolving a little bit more and he started to play out in space, he kind of got exposed. But his good plays and his good games for Cincinnati were legitimately good. It's the reason why he lasted, I think, 7 years with the Bengals as like as a linebacker. And the hype with him was, I mean, you remember obviously being an SC guy, like the hype with him was crazy, along with Brian Cushing, and I think there's another linebacker there for the
Clay
Trojans.
Matthews.
And yeah, of course, Clay Matthews, right? So
and,
like
yeah, Kaluka Mayava, if you remember him, he played for the Browns for a spot.
Right. That was a great era of USC football, and like there was a lot of excitement of bringing a guy like that to the Bengals, and he did show some promise. But again, like I just think like the athlete that he was and the physicality and the power that he had at the position, I just feel like his career isn't looked at as fondly because of some of his weaknesses and whatnot. But he was a fun player to watch, and he was a fun player to kind of root for. And again, if he was like a guy in like the late 90s, early 2000s instead of the late 2000s and 2010s, I think his career would have been looked at a little bit better. He might have just been a guy of his time, but I'm glad they're giving him some type of spotlight.
He was a little bit of a throwback, middle linebacker, thumper. If you remember, he had to play initially. I think they started him at strong side, not necessarily in the middle. And so if you remember this, when he came in as a rookie, he wowed Marvin Lewis and the coaches so much that they started to have to get him on the field more. And he supplanted, remember Rashad Jeanty?
Yeah.
He supplanted him, and Jeanty was pretty well cemented into that defense at that point. I think he'd been with the Bengals for 4 or 5 years at that point. Really big guy that Marvin Lewis trusted, and he said, we can't keep Ray Maluga off the field as a rookie. So never quite lived up to the hype, like you said. Maybe a little bit of a victim of playing in a one generation too late, like you said. But cool to see him back. There's been a lot of twists and turns with him, and good to see him back as ruler of the jungle. And that's a good call, John. A nice stroll down memory lane. I remember saying, why is this guy here at the top of the second round? You know, I mean, there was talk that he was going to go top 10, top 15, all that kind of stuff. And then his all the rest of his guys, except for Mayava, who went, I think, third round, the other two, Cushing and Matthews, went way ahead of him, which I think was a little bit of a surprise to some people. And then here he is, top of the second round. The Bengals, man, that draft class too. Talk about, I mean, you had Andre Smith, who navigated his way to having a decent career finally at one point. You had Maluga, who was with the team for a long time, had a decent career himself. And then you had Michael Johnson in that third round. And then I think, if I remember correctly, wasn't Clint Bowling in the fourth round that year?
No, it was 2011.
It was 2011. Excuse me. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
There was somebody else. I'm not looking at it right now. But those first three picks.
Kevin Huber, I think, in that class too.
He was a fifth round. Yeah, Kevin Huber was fifth round in that class. Yeah. So they and that was a year too. They're coming off of 08, which was a disappointment. Carson was hurt for most of that year, and they really needed to swing for the fences in that draft, and they did, and they quickly made it back to the postseason that year. And Maluga was a big reason why. That defense was a big reason why they had a nice bounce back year. But good stroll down memory lane. Andrew Cano saying, "Hey guys, we can't wait for week 1 of the preseason NFL. How about you?" Yeah, we're pretty excited about it. I mean, it's not going to be the prettiest brand of football. We can't promise you that. It's preseason week 1. We know this, but it's back. The Bengals are back, and their starters are going to be back. So, John, thank you, bud. You are the man, and you go have yourself a good time out on the town this evening. Thank you all we got a lot of people watching us live. I think now we've got the Cincy Jungle Twitter stream back, so you can tune in live there along with many other platforms. Go to our YouTube channel, subscribe there. You can see our shows, The Orange and Black Insider and 3 and Out, all there. The YouTube channel can be reached by clicking the Orange and Black Insider show icon, bottom right-hand side of the screen as you are looking at it. And you can hit the subscribe button, the bell to be notified when we go live, when new content is available, and then give us a thumbs up if you like what we're doing. We appreciate that. And of course, you have to go sign back up, or resubscribe rather, to the Believe in Cincy, BLEAV in Cincy podcast channel, our show 3 and Out, as well as Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends, and Matt and Willie No Ball with the coach Matt Minnick and the great Willie Lutz, talking some X's and O's and other things. We've got you covered throughout the whole week with a bunch of different shows. We hope you like all of them. We appreciate all your support. Go resubscribe, though, please, because we are on a new feed, and we want you back. We want you back. Leave us a rating if you can as well. John, have a great weekend, buddy. All of you have great weekends as well, and we'll be back to talk about what happened after the Bengals' first preseason game of 2024. Take care.
Peace.